Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here. I am a Master Gardener with Hennepin County. Hennepin County is part of the larger University of Minnesota Extension Master Gardeners program. We have 300 plus Master Gardeners in Hennepin County. The two handouts that she gave you, the pink one, hopefully that will help you take some notes, and then the evaluation is really, oh, there. Okay, it's really important for us for feedback. So how many out there are gardening in the shade? Great. I have a fairly large shade garden. I started with a lot of sun in my garden, and those gardens are pretty well established, but then I took on the challenge of gardening in the shade. And I think that gardening in the shade is more challenging than gardening with full sun. So I'm hoping that I have some tips and that you have lots of questions. I'm joined by a couple of other Master Gardening colleagues today, so you have more resources to ask. And I'll also cover some of the online resources that and phone line resources too that are great. So I'm going to back up a little bit. This is a gorgeous picture. Can any of you see this? So this garden is the Munsinger Garden in St. Cloud, and this is a really good example of a shade garden where they've done a great job of combining all different kinds of plants in a way that really is gorgeous. So we talked about the Master Gardener program. If anybody's interested, there's lots more information that I would love to share if you'd like to become a Master Gardener or find out about other events. So let's talk about some goals for this presentation. So first, I want you to feel confident in knowing how to assess your garden site. We'll be looking at light, soil, pH, moisture, and your USDA hardiness zone. Those are all the things that are good to start looking at before you do anything else. The second goal is that you'll feel more confident in choosing plants for your shade garden. And the third goal is to just go out and do it. Make a plan, install a new garden, have fun with that. So we'll start by reviewing some basic information. And this is relative to perennial garden, whether you're gardening in shade or sun. If this is new, I don't want you to worry about it, because this is something that it doesn't hurt to go over every single time. So we'll talk about the different types of perennials, the different types of plants, annuals, perennials, and biennials. And we'll talk about plant zones, soil, water, light, and the right plant in the right site. So annuals spend all of their energy blooming, and they set seed at the very end of the season so that that's how they propagate. I once had somebody who asked me, so I want bloom in my garden all year long. What perennial will do that? Well, there aren't any perennials that will do that. That's actually the definition of an annual. So perennials spend a lot of the time, they'll spend a period of time blooming, but then they need to store energy and food for the next season. So there are perennials that, hang on. Oh, I wanted to talk about what perennials we have. So lilies, tulips, those are two kinds of perennials that use bulbs. Others use big root sources like hosta. So those are the two kinds of perennials that we have. And then biennials, and that's a biennial, that's foxglove. They start out in the first year, they grow a base flower, or a base plant, no flower. And then in the second year, they bloom, they set seed, and they die. So foxglove is a great plant for shade, but you just got to know that you're going to lose it after 2 years unless it self-seeds for you. So there are two kinds of perennials, herbaceous and woody. And in this presentation, we're just going to talk about the herbaceous perennials. So this, at least the one on the right, which is the USDA hardiness zone map, should be familiar to most gardeners in Minnesota. We are typically in zones 3 and 4, which means that we see temperatures, winter temperatures between -30 and -40. The map on the right is a newer map, and that was created by the National Arbor Day Foundation. They've been monitoring winter low temperatures for about 15 years, and they have moved Minnesota into a warmer zone, but we, as master gardeners, tend to be a little more conservative. We just think that you can use that map and take a chance, but we recommend that you not buy really expensive trees or big shrubs, that if the weather changes and we have a severe year, it knocks them out. So that's our sort of advice at this point in time. So your soil is the backbone of your garden. Knowing what kind of soil you have, what amendments it might need, makes a big difference in the success of your gardening. So the University of Minnesota has a soil testing laboratory, and you can go out to the website, and on the website it'll show you how to collect a sample and send it in. What they'll tell you is what the pH of your soil is and what the best fertilizer or amendment strategy would be. So it's a great place to start. If you collected a sample and sent it in this week, you'd have it back in a couple of weeks. So it can be part of your planning process. The other thing that I want to say, which was something that I learned as a gardener when I first started, which is that any garden that you have where you can add compost or you can amend the soil, the more that you improve your soil, the better your gardening results will be. So that includes peat moss, composted cow manure, or regular compost. And I invested in a small tiller, one of those little electric tillers actually, and just getting it mixed in with your soil before you plant will help ensure your success. Okay, hang on. So soil is made up of particles. Some of them are really coarse and big, some of them are very fine, and some of them are really small and slippery and slick. How many of you have clay soils in your yard? Okay, for you folks, you can't amend that soil too much, because when you amend the soil, you're creating more airflow for roots and more capacity to hold water, all of which are really important. I don't have very much clay in my garden, but I've talked to a lot of master gardeners who say it really is difficult. And one of the easy ways to tell what kind of soil you have is just to put a sprinkler out there and let it run until you get about an inch of water and see how long it takes. So the longer that it takes, soil that's clay, that water may sit there for quite a while before it goes. You want to have good penetration from water, and to do that, you've got to change the structure of that soil with amendments like peat moss and compost. There's one more thing that I want to talk about before you plant your garden. So you've amended your soil, but you have some pretty difficult perennial weeds that you've seen in your garden. I have quackgrass in my garden. It's really much easier to pull or to kill that quackgrass before you plant than trying work in your garden and get it out. I have some quackgrass in one large garden, and I have not been able to remove it. And I really wished I'd heard this advice before I set that garden up. So again, we're talking about soil preparation. That's part of the process. Remove the weeds, amend the soil, and then you're ready. One of the things that if you have a soil sample analysis, you'll find out what the pH is. Different plants require different pH, so it's really nice to know ahead of time what your soil condition is. So pH measures the soil acidity. pH of 7 is neutral. Anything above is alkaline, anything below that is acid. So who grows hydrangeas? Anybody? They like acid soil. So they require you to amend the soil to get that condition if you don't already have it. Plants will grow, plants prefer 6 to 7, so slightly acid to neutral, most of them. They'll tolerate of different range, a little wider range, but if you can amend the soil to get to that optimum, again, you'll increase your chances of success. Now, the exception to this rule is evergreens and a lot of large shrubs, which like a more acid condition. So for that, you would add sulfur, and we recommend organic sulfur. So once you've gotten your garden in place, and you might have a lot of new plants, watering is really an important strategy for reducing disease and providing the right amount of moisture for your plants. So we really recommend that you water the ground, not the plant. I was out in my garden the other day, and I water the ground, but you know, if you have rain is going to do whatever it does. And I noticed that the bottoms of my leaves were really splashed with all things. That picks up all kinds of bacteria and other soil-borne diseases. So the rain's going to do that unless you have a layer of compost down, but you can reduce that by not watering the leaves. We recommend that you water early in the morning so that whatever moisture is there will quickly evaporate over time. And hoses and drip irrigation are great ways of providing moisture. They're more work to set up, but they're less work in the long run once they're installed. So here's an example. That's a soaker hose on the left, and then a little drip irrigation system on the right. Pretty spectacular shade garden, wouldn't you say? Okay, so what was the success to this person's shade garden installation? Well, here, this garden is under 3 silver maple trees. This gardener couldn't even get dense shade grass to grow under there. Big trees compete for water. So often, shade gardens require more water. So this gardener added 6 inches of soil for the new garden, and then watered it in really well to keep it. But you've got to make sure that you're watering not just for the garden, but actually for the trees. I find that I water my shade gardens more, or as much, if not more, than the sun gardens that I have. Oh, and especially after rain, because that dense canopy of your trees really prevents the rain from getting to your perennials under the trees. Sunlight. So this is a question that master gardeners get all the time. So we break it up into 4. So dense shade means that you get 0 to 2 hours of sun a day. Part shade, part sun is 2 to 4 hours of sun. Part sun, part shade is 4 to 6. Seems like a lot of sun, doesn't it? And full sun is greater than 6 hours of sun per day. The thing that's really interesting about many shade gardens is unless you're gardening under trees, totally under trees, at the perimeter, you're often going to get more sun. So that's a place where you can actually try things that, that are part shade, but again, you need to know how much sun those plants are going to get to meet their requirements. So let's talk a little bit about texture in the shade garden. I find that texture is really key. There are some things that will bloom in shade that have color. I have Martagon lilies. They bloom early in the spring. They are pinks and golds, and that's great. But the majority of the time, your shade garden is going to be shades of green with maybe some accent colors. So we want to look at texture as a major component when you design your shade garden. Hosta come in all varieties with all different kinds of textures. Some of them are really wrinkly and crinkly, some of them, and they also have a wide range of color too. So hosta they really are a staple in the garden, but I do want you to know that there are lots of other things that you can use.
Anne,
Yes?
are you going to name the plant?
Oh, so there are astilbe, that's the one with the pink spike. Yep, purple spike. And then I think along the bottom is probably, actually I think that's the astilbe leaves on the bottom, and then there are 2 hosta, and I don't know what's in the back. I can't really tell. I'll try to do a better job of that. Okay, so another design strategy is to have small, medium, and tall plants in your garden. So in this one, we have got Annabelle hydrangea, and then hosta. This Annabelle hydrangea is one of the most reliable large shade plants that I know. It will grow in not the densest of dense shade, but it will grow in dense shade. And I recommend that as a back of the border or back of the garden or centerpiece, because it can get substantial. I have one that gets to about this over the season, starting with nothing at the bottom. Ground covers. So who's got what we call creeping Jenny, ajuga, and what's the one? And I think that's snow on the mountain on the left. So all of these, so the person who wrote this presentation said, ground covers tend to spread. Okay, among Minnesota gardeners, there's the I word for invasive. Okay, so you want to watch your ground covers. It's a great way of defining a garden, and all of these are good options for shade, but you will need to sort of keep track of them or they will go wild. So in this photo, we've got Pachysandra on the left, and that's the creeping Jenny, also known as Lysimachia numularia. Normally we'd throw a lot of Latin terms at you because we're supposed to do that, but that's about the only one I'm going to use today. I love the creeping Jenny because it's kind of chartreuse. So again, in a shade garden where you are dealing with various colors of green, having something that's really light or bright, variegated hosta, something like this that is really light colored. This also blooms with little yellow flowers at a certain point in time. It's a great way of getting some variety and visual interest in your garden. Okay, now we're going to talk about small plants. This plant on the top left are some hosta. On the top right, more hosta, and did she say what this is? Any guesses? That's on the bottom, but how about on the right? More hosta. I can't tell what's in the middle. And it's funny because there are small hosta, but there are also giant hosta. And that's another, if you choose a very large hosta, it's another great background plant. But I use hosta in all levels because there are large, medium, small, and now there are these little miniature things, which are really cute. When you're choosing plants, so the garden on the top left is a new garden. And notice that there's lots of room around all the plants. I moved here from California. So I had to learn gardening from the very beginning, all over. And the best advice I ever got was that in Minnesota, in the first year, your new plants will sleep. In the second year, they will creep. And in the third year, they will leap. Over and over. I say this to myself whenever I plant anything because I tend to plant things too close together. Read those plant tags, and really, if it says that it's going to be 4 feet wide, give it 4 feet wide room. It won't, it will take those 3 years, but in that third year, your garden will be totally filled in. Oh, it's wild geranium, but it has no flowers on it. That's what's in the upper right hand, in between the hosta. And right now, I have that in my garden. It's about 18 inches tall, and it is covered with purple blooms. And it will spread quickly, too. And because it's a native wildflower, it does really well here. So who grows coral bells or heuchera? I have been amazed at all the new varieties of heuchera. If you can name a color, they have a hybrid. Now, I question the hardiness of some of these plants, but that plant on the left, and we don't have the variety name, I'm sorry, but think about that in a shade garden and how glamorous that would be for your eyes to focus on. The other thing that is really hard when you do a presentation like this is to give size comparisons, because the plant on the right, which is tiarella or foam flower, is a very small little guy. Really precious. It blooms again early in the spring. Mine's blooming right now, but it's really pretty, and they come with lots of different varieties too. Yes?
The one on the left side.
That's a heuchera.
Oh, it is.
Yep. Heuchera, or coral bells. Varieties of coral bells if you go to your nursery. So, early blooming. What's blooming in my garden now? So, top left, pulmonaria. Pulmonaria is a great staple for a shade garden. The leaves are mossy, or are fuzzy, and they have these spots on them, and they make lovely little mounds. So they bloom early in the spring with these spikes. The spikes can be blue, pink, white, raspberry colored, but the rest of the season, at least you have this really interesting vegetation to look at. On the right is shooting star. Anybody have that? Very fun plant, just so fun. I love it. There is a native shooting star that is fuchsia colored, and I've seen it in nurseries but not blooming, and I saw it out at one of the state parks just last week. But I've never, although my tag says that that's the color mine is supposed to be, it's never been other than white. The bottom is Lamium. Now this is another one that is early blooming. It's also a ground cover, but that the vegetation on that is green and almost kind of a aluminum color. So that's a very interesting one, and it does have those yellow spiky flowers early in the spring. Balloon flower on the top left, Ligularia on the top right, variegated Solomon seal bottom left, and lilies. Okay, now, my balloon flower doesn't bloom until July, and so I would not consider that an early bloomer. And the Ligularia doesn't bloom until July either. And I would also consider Ligularia a medium to large plant, and that's a plant that really likes water. So if you have it in late afternoon sun, you're going to come out and it's going to look like it's going to die. So you have to really give it water when it needs it, and it's mostly just limp, but it kind of ruins the effect to come out and have it just totally limp. Yes?
Would you give me the name of that blue flower again?
So that's balloon flower, polycodon. And it comes in pink and white and that wonderful blue. And it grows in those kind of spikes.
Poly what?
Polycodon.
Colon?
Codon. Polycodon. Columbine, who grows that? Oh, I can tell who the shade gardeners are. Their hands keep going up. Columbine, these are hybrid columbines, but there is you might recognize the native one, which is orange and yellow. I love these plants because they self-seed everywhere in my garden. So very reliable, blooming now. They're about 18 inches tall. So again, these are taller plants. The Annabelle hydrangea, top left. This is not a very good picture of Angelica on the right. Angelica has this great stalk with this really interesting flower. I consider it a biennial, not a perennial. But it's very interesting, and it does really well in dense shade. And then the bottom, some lilies will grow in the shade. Those are stargazers. They do pretty well. Now, I don't have pictures, and this is why we're doing this, so that I can see where the gaps in the presentation are. There are two larger plants that I have found that lots of people have never heard of that I consider staples for shade gardens. One is Rogersia. Raise your hand. Aha, gotcha. Okay, Rogersia has these huge leaves. They look like palm leaves. And it comes, and Rogersia you can remember because it's Roger's plant. That's who made it. I don't know which Roger. But it comes in bronze and different colors of green, and it will grow to about 4 feet tall with these enormous leaves. It almost looks tropical. It does look tropical. And the other one is wax bells. I saw that for the first time when I was out at the Arboretum in the fall. It blooms in late August through September, and it has huge leaves that look like maple tree leaves. And then when it blooms, it has yellow bells, pendulous yellow bells that are about 2.5 inches. So it's a great addition for the back of the garden, shade garden. Very fun. How's everybody's bleeding heart doing this year? Oh my gosh, they're just going crazy. This is the weather they like. They don't like it too hot. Mine have been blooming for well over a month now, and they don't look like they're going to stop. If we don't have hail, my garden will be great. I was a little frightened on Sunday when they said we were going to have hail. The thing about bleeding heart is that they die back in July and August. So you've got this kind of yellow, ugly plant. So consider putting them behind something, a hosta or some smaller plant, so that you camouflage it at least a little bit. I love ferns. Actually, there aren't any plants I don't love. I love ferns, though, in the shade garden because they're a staple. They love shade. That's where they prefer to be. So the one on the left is maidenhair. It's about 15 to 18 inches. It's very dainty and delicate. And then on the right is a lady fern, and they can get up to 3 feet high. And I saw a lady fern the other day at the Master Gardener sale, which was last Saturday, that had gorgeous red stems. So there's variety too. You can get color that way. So that's interrupted fern on the left, and then Japanese painted ferns. And this again is a great, the Japanese painted ferns are wonderful for adding contrast. They have, again, a lighter, kind of a silvery and red coloring to them. And in my garden, they reproduce pretty well. So I've been able to move them around and divide them. I guess I would divide them first and then move them around. So I've been talking about bloom time as we've gone along, but we're going to do it a little more systematically now. That's primrose and tulip. All right, early blooming perennials. Bleeding heart, and then on the right are two what are known as spring ephemerals. This is a whole class of plants that are typically woodland plants. You'll find them in woodland in the state parks, that they like the situation where the deciduous trees have not leafed out yet. So they bloom very early, and they often disappear in your garden after they've bloomed. Sometimes there's no remnant. I have hepatica, which has little heart-shaped leaves. It blooms this year it bloomed at the end of April, so right after the snow. Bloodroot, hepatica. This picture is of Jack in the Pulpit, Dutchman's breeches, May apple. All of those woodland flowers bloom really early before that. As soon as the soil warms up a little bit and there's sunshine, these guys bloom. So besides that, we have the pulmonaria, shooting star, and woodland poppy. And you saw shooting star. Those are all blooming now, as is lily of the valley. Early summer, we're going to see lilies, and we're going to see those fabulous, variegated, fancy coral bells. Now, when they bloom, and this doesn't show the heuchera blooming, they have little spikes that come out with little dainty flowers on them. All right. Could use some pictures here. Mid to late summer bloomers. Hosta, I don't know if anybody in here grows hostas for their blooms. I don't. I grow them for their leaves. But they do have spikes, and some of the flowers are really wonderfully fragrant. So if you grow hosta, go out and smell the flowers. See if there's anything you like, because they're lovely to bring inside. Foxglove, we saw that tall spike that blooms now, or that blooms late summer, mid to late. And then goat spirit, and I wish I had a picture of this because this is a lovely plant. It can be up to about 3 feet tall, and it has kind of a frondy, very delicate fern-like foliage to it. So it's quite nice. Late summer blooming. This is Monarda on the left, also known as bee balm, standard in lots of people's gardens. I don't have it in my shade garden because I didn't know it would grow there. So I'm going to transplant some and see how it does. We talked about Ligularia before. This is a different hybrid of Ligularia. This has more of a daisy bloom. The other one was rocket. It has that spike of yellow. This is a more gold. And the other thing that we don't have a picture of, which I think is going to do really great this year, is turtlehead. Anybody grow turtlehead? That's, you know, it took a while to get established in my garden, but I have it at the back of the border, and there's one called Hot Lips, which is bright fuchsia, and it blooms in August, and it is great, and it blooms for a number of weeks, so it can really tolerate the hot summer afternoon sun or the heat of the afternoon. All right. And the fall bloomers. So the plant on the left is called Acatea, but you might know it as bugbane. So this puts out 6-foot spikes at the end, these candle-like spikes in the end of the summer, and there is a fragrance, and to some it is an odor. So bugbane, the insects all like it, but there are some people who can smell it a long way off, and they really don't like it. Just a warning. Other plants, and I don't think that the label I have for the plant on the right is correct, but some of the other things that bloom at this time are, and I have a stilby that bloom at this time, and that's sort of what that looks like, but I'm not sure. So something called false dragonhead, which I'm not familiar with, goldenrod, asters, and the fall blooming anemones, which come in a wide variety, and some can be really tall. So we don't have a lot of time to talk about design, but I'm just going to ask you to think about a couple of things. When you're thinking about your garden, do you want it to be formal or informal? That's generally where I start. When I think of formal gardens, I think of the gardens at the Arboretum, Munsinger and Clemens in St. Cloud. There's a garden out on Lake Minnetonka called Nuremberg Gardens. People ever visited that garden? That's a fabulous garden. But those are formal gardens. They are very planned. They often have paths and statuary and everything else. But I'm a much more informal gardener. It's sort of like, I want people to feel welcome. I'm a garden. I'm not trying to create anything that is formal. That's the word. So think about what you want to do, and think about the plants that you love, and then sort of decide how that might look. So if you can have a picture in your mind of where you're going, that helps you sort of pick the plants that will work with that. Oh, now this cracks me up, because we finished all about plants and we segued to design, but now we're back to plants. Grasses, there are some grasses that do grow in shade. This is Hakone forest grass, which is a Japanese grass, and there are a number of varieties, several of them are variegated. It has those long, thin blades. It's really a pretty grass. I have mine in the front of the garden because it doesn't get too large in shady places, but it will grow. Okay, this is at Glen Sheen in Duluth, and that beautiful pink grass in the back is Calamagrostis brachytricha. Don't know anything more about it, but those are hosta and impatiens. So this is probably a partial shade garden, but that grass looks stunning there. So do a little research. If you like grass and you like it in the back, there are some grasses that you can find. Okay. That's all of the formal part of the presentation, but I want you to know that there are some fabulous resources for you out there. Before I became a master gardener, I didn't realize how much work the University of Minnesota Extension does for gardeners. If you go to the University of Minnesota Extension website, there is a whole section just on gardening for us. You can diagnose problems, you can identify plants and pests, And there's all kinds of gardening topics. Now, like most websites, getting familiar with it is half the battle. I wanted to know what they had for shade gardening, and it took me a while, but there is a search function on the website. So what I did was I went to the University of Minnesota Extension website, I went to garden, and I put in shade gardening. And there was a wonderful publication there that was really helpful. So as a backup, you might try that. Hennepin County Master Gardeners, and I am a member of that group, we have our own website. You'll find out about events. You can ask a Master Gardener a question. You can submit it online, or you can leave a message. Sometimes there's actually somebody on the line to answer your question. But we have a commitment to get back to you as soon as possible, at least to let you know that we received if we have to do the research to find it. We're also on Facebook, which is relatively new for us. We just put our page up on Facebook last year, and we have been monitoring that. So when we have events, and the Hennepin County Master Gardeners has events. We have two major events. We have the plant sale, which is usually held at the Hopkins Pavilion, Ice Pavilion. That happened last Saturday. We had 9,000 plants that were grown by master gardeners, and the prices are really inexpensive. So you can go to the website and get on an email list if that's something you'd like to do next year. We also have a learning tour, a garden tour that's a learning tour. So there are lots of gardening tours where you can go and look at people's gardens, but we do a learning garden tour. So in every garden there is a topic that gets covered with master gardeners to answer your questions and to explain the garden to you.